Good evening, lads and gents. Today is March 11th, 2021, with tonight's hosts, Nicole Mason and Caleb Brown.
Today, we're covering a profoundly serious news report detailing a stream of vicious attacks targeting the Asian American community.
On January 28th, 2021, surveillance footage caught 84-year-old Thai immigrant Vika Beach.
Okay, one more take.
Okay.
Wait, can I see the name?
No, we have it.
Vicha
Vicha Ratanapudi. It's still recording.
Screw it. Restart from the start. We'll cut this part out. We'll cut this part out. Okay. One more time.
Like from the start?
Yeah, okay, and we're live in 5,
4, 3, 2.
Good evening, lads and gents. Today is March 11th, 2021, with tonight's hosts, Nicole Mason and Caleb Brown.
Today, we're covering a profoundly serious news report detailing a stream of vicious attacks targeting the Asian American community.
On January 28th, 2021, surveillance footage caught 84-year-old Thai immigrant Vicha Ratanapakadi in the middle of a walk through the Anza Vista neighborhood in San Francisco, get maliciously shoved to the ground. Footage shows an unidentifiable figure rush across the street, violently pushing Ratanapakadi in a sudden attack before walking away.
Suspects 19-year-old Antoine Watson and unforeseen accomplice Malaysia Gu were arrested on January 30th, 2021. During first court hearing, Watson pleads not guilty. Ratanapakdi was later pronounced dead on January 31st, 2021 at the San Francisco General Hospital from injuries sustained during the Thursday assault.
This was only one of the numerous anti-Asian incidents that have occurred after the surge of the novel coronavirus, identified early January of 2020. The first outbreak was discovered in Wuhan, China, which only amplified the pre-existing racism in America.
Tweets and media appearances by former President Donald J. Trump endorsing xenophobic speech, including racist terms such as Chinese virus and Kung Flu, have further encouraged racist behavior targeting the Asian American and Pacific Island community, both through forms of cyber racism and verbal and physical attacks. This concept single-handedly dehumanizes Asians, discrediting them to the impression that they are nothing more than a virus.
Now, this isn't the first instance of xenophobic practices targeting Asians, dating back all the way to the 19th century, with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 condemning immigration of Chinese laborers in the United States.
Nicole, may I ask you to define the term xenophobic practices?
Generally speaking, we would define xenophobic practices to describe discriminatory behavior to those whom one may consider foreign to the country, solely basing their identity to nothing more than one's ethnicity and race. There have been many patterns of xenophobia recently being covered in the media, including the slashing of a Filipino man's face on a New York subway, with statistics coming from the Stop AAPI Hate reporting centers stating that New York hate crimes have augmented up to 1,900% more.
I'm curious to know, now considering the longevity of this phenomenon, why it's only being widely covered by the media now. Why now? Why is it that victims of racism from the SARS epidemic from 2003 trying to speak out had their experiences dismissed?
Well, when toxic stereotypes such as the model minority are labeled upon Asians, giving a false reality where they thrive socioeconomically and lead successful lives, it gives the perception that they're immune to any sort of discriminatory sentiment. It's become so normalized that anti-Asian comments can easily be disguised as dark humor, and that anyone who says otherwise is labeled by society as too sensitive.
You know, growing up as a Filipino Canadian myself, living in a world where anti-Asian sentiment gets brushed off and undermined so often, it's devastating. I remember being 10 and having kids go up to me, pulling their eyes back and telling me they were allergic to Chinese people. At the time, I didn't understand, but I knew I grew a little bit more self-conscious that day. Now I realize it was some sort of internalized racism growing. I hated the fact that I was Asian. I hated the fact that I didn't carry those Eurocentric beauty standards that everyone loves. And those are all thoughts a 10-year-old shouldn't even have to carry.
Unfortunately, overlooked racism like that is an everyday experience for many communities. It's a well-known fact that the Black community and its allies have recently been revolting against the overwhelming racism and violence in North America.
Would it be fair to say that the recent Black Lives Matter protests last summer have also had its own influence on the recent media coverage?
In what way?
In a way that after more than 7 years of trying to get the movement on a steady rise, it has caused one of the most meaningful and toughest conversations to start off a new decade. After the tragic murder of George Floyd, a newfound outcry emerged from voices no matter race, no matter ethnicity, all over the world, to stand in solidarity and finally speak out against the systemic racism the United States falls under. Seeing the success of what once started off as something small take over all news coverage and all social media, all of that is inspiring. These events sparked up a new conversation, not just anti-Black sentiment, but racism as a whole. Viewing the population come together creates some sort of comfort space for anyone to speak out, knowing that there will be others out there to hear their stories. The results from this can be considered what we see in the media today, covering all these stories from Asians around the world.
This recent countrywide uproar has taken over social media, bringing awareness to all kinds of new people. But has it reached the place it matters most? The most effective way to make real change is to use the government to make real laws and bills.
As previously mentioned, having Donald Trump in office was incredibly damaging to the Asian American community and diminished hope of positive changes. However, the new president, Joe Biden, is already taking action.
The Biden administration has already passed an executive action to ban government officials from using inflammatory language like the Chinese plague and Kung flu. They are also working towards reinforcing their Justice Department by passing the No Hate Act, specifically targeting the reporting, tracking, and prosecutions of hate incidents.
While this is a step in the right direction, it's simply not enough. Asian American civil rights leaders are urging government officials to make a stronger effort. After all, people's lives are at stake. But at the end of the day, the White House is still built on white supremacy, and protecting Asian Americans just isn't a priority.
A big issue is the inconsistency in the reports of hate crime data. Few local law enforcement agencies take part in federal data collection. This skews any results that could be used for petitions or law enforcement training programs. Approximately 51% of Asian Americans are concerned about being the victim of a hate crime, while 79% say they have experienced more discrimination in society since the beginning of the pandemic.
Luckily, some good Samaritans have appeared all over the country to protect older Asian Americans. These days, it can be dangerous for to even walk around their own neighborhoods. So many local programs have been introduced where people can volunteer to walk with them to avoid any unprovoked attacks.
It's awful that we live in a world where such extreme racism exists and is normalized. It's clear that we need to make a big difference. Caleb, can you share some info on what we as individuals can do to make a difference?
Well, Nicole, it's always important to educate yourself. But beyond that, you can sign petitions, safely attend any protests, spread awareness, and participate in any volunteer walks with elderly Asian Americans. But most importantly of all, be aware of any racial biases you may have. Stand up to violent Asian haters, call out your problematic friends, and remember, we are all humans living on this earth together.
This concludes tonight's segment of TTN. I'm Nicole Mason.
And I'm Kaylin Brown.
Thank you so much for tuning in.
That's working.
What are you doing? Are you
We
done?
concluded the segment.
Oh.
That was 9 minutes.